Now, joining me now is a change of tack. We are going to celebrate a man who has spent 40 years in the New South Wales Legislative Council. He's punched above his weight, I guess, and I'm sure he's got a great many stories to tell. That's Christian Democrats leader Fred Nile. He's announced he's going to retire from the New South Wales Parliament this year, as I said, after nearly 40 years in politics. Reverend Fred Nile, thank you for joining the Bolt Report. Tell me, what's prompted this decision after 40 years in the New South Wales Parliament?
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Cory, to be on your show tonight. I watch Foxtel every night, so I'm right up to date with what you're saying and doing.
Fantastic.
Well, basically, I'm now 80, come up to 87, and everybody keeps asking me who's my successor. So I prayed about it, and there's a man that I admire who's been very active in the Australian Christian lobby, and he has agreed to be my successor in the State Parliament later this year.
That's great. Do we have a date on when that will take place, Reverend?
Yeah, November this year.
November this year. Well, I'm sure there will be a great many people who will be celebrating your career in politics. Now, from your personal perspective, over 40 years you've seen some massive changes.
And that's the guy, Lyle Shelton.
Yeah.
That's him.
What are some of the highlights of your career in Parliament?
Well, the highlights would be where I've succeeded in getting a bill passed. When you're elected to the State Parliament and you're not part of a major party, it's almost impossible to get a bill passed. And that's what people told me, but I'm very persistent. And so I nominated 25 different bills, and then I worked very hard in lobbying the Labor and Liberal governments, and I've succeeded in having a number of those bills passed. Bills which have covered a wide range of areas, including such as what I call my health bills, banning tobacco advertising, and also prohibiting smoking in public places in New South Wales and smoking in cars. That was just one category of my bills, but they covered a whole range of topics. And I'm very pleased
areas of interest
to get them covered, get them carried.
Yeah, but over that time there must have been some great disappointments for you as well. What would be some of the lower lights of your career? We don't want to reflect on the negatives, but you must have felt some personal disappointments and some sorrows along the way.
Yes, well, I've had a few bills that are still sitting on the shelf that haven't progressed at all. Bills prohibiting abortion. There's a very vocal abortion lobby, and so whenever I put those bills up, they did all they could to mobilise opposition to them, and sadly that influenced both Labor and Liberal governments, so they wouldn't go down that particular pathway. But I have been able to negotiate with them. I always said I'm here to be constructive, not obstructive. I'm not here to block the government. I want to work with the government, whether it's a Labor or Liberal government, and that seemed to be a pathway to success, where you could then negotiate with that government to get a bill passed, like those smoking bills and others that I've had go through the Parliament. I just did a new one just recently, my provocation bill. There's quite a few individuals, males, who bash their wife, sometimes even kill their wife, and when they go to court, he said, well, she provoked me, she nagged me and drove me to it. It's not my fault. And asking to be charged with manslaughter and not murder. So I've had that removed now. That provocation excuse no longer exists in New South Wales law. So if you do those things, you'll pay the penalty, which will be for murder, a long time in jail.
And tell me, Reverend, often that politicians, after they've left Parliament, they say, I regret the things I didn't say, or I regret the things that I didn't do. Is there anything that you said or did that you actually regret or wish you'd chosen your words or actions slightly differently?
Not that I can think of, Cory. I've always been very careful in what I say in Parliament and publicly. And I know some people have said, oh, well, Fred Nile hates gays. And I said, well, go through all my speeches. Can you find anywhere where I said anything remotely like I hate gays? I work with all individuals, whether I agree with them or their lifestyle or not. I respect them. And as Jesus said, love your enemies. And I've always sought to work with people with a different point of view to my own.
Well, Reverend Fred Nile, you've been one of the icons of the New South Wales Parliament, and you've, as I said in my introduction, punched well above your weight right around Australia. After 40 years, you've got a lot to be proud of. I'm sure there'll be a few that will be happy to see you go, but nonetheless, you've been a great servant to the people of New South Wales. Thanks very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Cory, and God bless you and your program.